Hey everyone, how's it going? So welcome to the first ever episode of Reel Up My Ride. The idea of this series is to take the blueprints of rides, coasters and park areas that you send me and then inject some realism into them by using my own experience of real life theme park design and also what's playable in Planet Coaster as well. So I'll pop details in the description below of how you can send all of your blueprints and everything to me, along with some of the information that I'm going to need. For today's episode, we're in a park called Sunshine Park, so thank you so much, Jesse Parks, for sending this one over. This is the area that we're dealing with. It's very much a Boardwalk, Californian coastal kind of vibe to it. You can tell that by the kind of colours that have been used and the materials and this diner aspect. Just gives off that kind of vibe. And in fact, this park is lovely. You've got sort of like a vibe of three different parks going on here. So the first one I get is Canada's Wonderland, because you're using theming, but it's very, very minimal. And when you do use theming, it's very obvious. You've also got a bit of a vibe of Cedar Point as well, in the sense that you've got a central meridian strip and everything is developed around it. And then you can always come back to that central strip. And for the third park, I was thinking that the vibe is giving off Poland's Energylandia, in the sense that you've got two very major construction projects going on simultaneously, and you've also quite obviously added three very high profile key rides to your portfolio at great investment. So this suggests to me rapid expansion, rapid investment, trying to get onto the theme park map as quickly as you possibly can, and so that's evidenced in this area. So the area that we're focusing on at the moment has got this roller coaster, two rides, and this lovely little lake area, and a couple of amenities. So I've had a chat with Jesse before doing this piece of work. There's a couple of things that we can do. So I'm okay to use any DLC items and any TMTK items. Those are already prevalent in the park wherever you look. I've got permission from Jesse to change absolutely anything in the Boardwalk area. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I'm going to or want to. You've put a lot of work into this area, and I want to maintain that original charm, and I want to maintain your original vision. So any changes I make will be because they have to be made, rather than because it's just anything that's necessarily wrong with the design as it is at the moment. The coaster itself is a coaster called Cliff Diver. It's a brand new B&M roller coaster. It would have been built around about 2018, 2019, so it's relatively new. I say relatively new, it's 2020, it's only a year old. And you're dealing with a budget of around $40 million, so about the amount that Yukon Striker would have cost, for example. A couple of things that I've noticed straight away: needs a maintenance area. We need to sort out the heartline rolling on some of the transitions and some of the inversions as well. But I do want to avoid changing the layout where I can. Like I say, you've spent time fitting this into the area, so I'm just going to need to make some tweaks just to make it more real than I am anything else. I'd also like to open up this plaza area as well. I think it needs some more monetization options, and in order to do that you need to create some space, and I'd also like to make a little bit more of this lake area as well. So what I would like to do is do this as an update kind of video, not as a speed build video where I just send you through various updates and show you what I've done for now. So with that in mind, I'd probably better stop talking. Let's go ahead with the first update. Alright, so here's the first update then, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that not much has changed, and that's pretty much because not much has. All I've done with this is I've gone around the whole coaster layout and I've just adjusted the heartline rolling where I can, things like the curves, things like this inversion, and just other areas that needed just a little bit of tweaking. I do have some feedback about the actual coaster and the realism of the coaster, but it's not my place. And I don't think it would be fair for me to go around and rebuild everything, particularly as a lot of care and effort has been put into making this coaster fit the area that it's designed for. And I didn't want to go around and strip it out and start again. Like I say, it's not my place to do that. But for what it's worth, this lift hill is probably a little bit too steep for what it's trying to achieve. You would tend to find 45-degree lift hills on things like the dive coasters and the wing coasters, but not necessarily on a sit-down coaster. You tend to find the angle no steeper than 40 degrees, typically 30. And with a newer style B&M sit-down coaster like this one and the floorless ones, you wouldn't necessarily need this pre-drop track anymore, because technology has come along with their coasters so much that this isn't really needed to reduce the strain on the chain anymore. It would just go straight into the first drop and into the first element. But for this coaster, it's absolutely fine. It fits its purpose. It does what it needs to do. So in terms of things that have changed, so I've just added the heartline rolling to this first bend. So the idea of the heartline rolling on a bend is that it's supposed to feel like the back end of the train is skidding out, and that's how you know you've got a good heartline roll. So this now does that. It skids out as it goes round the bend. I've then just had to reprofile and redirect this first inversion, and that's only because it was coming too close to the station. So I've just moved it down slightly, just so it no longer sort of impedes on that station area. And I've also added the heartline rolling as well, so you can now see as this train comes through that you've got that ribbon effect. It now looks like it should. And the idea of a heartline roll is it's supposed to invert the riders around their hearts rather than around their feet and around their heads. It depends on what you're looking for with the ride experience, but this is what you typically see, that kind of ribbon effect. And I'll show you how to do that with this at the back that I've got here in a second. I then just reprofiled this bend. Exactly the same principle as the first bend, but it's not so banked on this one because it doesn't take it at such a high speed. So it's not needed to be as highly banked, and it still gives a bit of excitement. Into the first inversion. I've not touched this area in terms of heartline rolling, purely because in order for me to be able to do this properly with heartline rolling, I would have had to strip this right back and start it again. And like I said before, it's not fair to do that. So I've just kept it as it is. But this final part of the layout now enters into a small airtime bunny hop rather than continuing the bank, and then it enters into the heartline rolled final run as well. I've also just done the brake run here. So I've straightened out the brake run. I've also lengthened the station, so you've now got 2 extra rows on your train. So a park like this would want higher capacity trains. And I'm also going to adjust where the queue line comes in. So I've changed the station to be entry one side, exit the other. A couple of reasons. It enables you a little bit more flexibility with the queue up in this area of the ride, away from the ride area, and brings it round the back here. And it also opens up this area more for a plaza style area, with the piece of work that I'm going to do later. So that's it for the actual coaster update itself. I'm just going to flip over to the other side where I'm going to be able to show you how to do this heartline rolling. So here we are with our roller coaster. I've just chosen one at complete random, and this is how I achieve the heartline rolls. There's a few ways that you can do it. It depends on your preference, but this is the way that I prefer to do it, purely because you get so much more control over the actual inversion and the way that the track is shaped. So I use the 4-meter method, and I use the 11.25 degree snap, and I'll bring my track up to a 45 degree or a 56 degree angle, depending on the type of coaster that I'm building. And then when I am ready to hit that heartline roll, I'll bring it down to 35 degrees. I'll then roll it by 45 degrees, and then I'll turn the banking offset to just shy of 2 meters. And I do it this extreme because when you smooth out the track, you're going to lose some of that heartline rolling. So even though it's pretty extreme when you go into it, by the time you've finished smoothing it, it'll be absolutely fine. And then I go down to 22.5 and across to 90. And then I go down to 11.25 and to 135, and then down to 0 and 180. And then you just reverse that all over again. So you go down 1 notch and across, down another notch, down to 90, down another one to 45, and then back down to your original entry angle, and then you come out of it that way. And then you go like that, like that, like that, and like that. So what that then leaves you with, although very, very rough around the edges, it needs smoothing, is that ribbon effect. So it is still a straight line. It enters and exits on the same axis, but it creates that S in the middle. And then all you do to smooth it out is you take 3 or 4, depending on your preference, sections at a time. You smooth, move across, smooth, move across, smooth, and you repeat that until you get to the end. and then you go backwards, and then you have to repeat the entire process between 3 and 6 times, depending on how smooth you want your coaster to be and the type of coaster that you're using. It's very time consuming, but the result that you get is absolutely so much worth it. If you're wanting a less extreme 0G roll, then all you do is you just adjust your bits in the middle. So rather than snapping to 11.25, you might snap to 15 degrees or 45 degrees or whatever your preference is. But that's how I achieve the 0G heartline rolling. So I hope that's helped. But let's cut to the next update anyway. Alright, update time, and as you can see there's quite a lot that's changed since the last update. We've introduced some plaza areas and we've widened out the paths completely. And there's a couple of reasons why we've had to do this. I was watching the guests and their behaviour, where they're going to, where they're coming from and that sort of thing. And I noticed that from the entrance area they would either come down to Tornado or they would come through our area to head to rides that are at the bottom. We also need to be a little bit considerate and mindful of what's going to happen when the 2 roller coasters that are under construction open. It's going to lend itself quite nicely to the guests either going up the main strip or coming through the area that we're developing now to get to where they want to go. Now what this does is it creates a high throughput area. There's going to be high footfall, there's going to be a lot of guests coming through. There's a couple of advantages that you can have, that you can take advantage of. So it creates an area where you can monetize really well. You can place things like game stalls and gift shops and food stalls and everything in the area, and your guests would get distracted on their way to doing what they're doing, and they'll buy things on their way and stuff. So the way that I've managed to pull this together is I've moved all of the queue for the roller coaster out of the way from the area that it was up to the area that was completely unused before. And it's now sitting nicely up there. I've also moved the diner around the lake slightly so that I'm able to make a feature of this water area and have a bit of a seating area at the back. And it then creates a little bit of a problem because we've got rides that are sitting around the lake already. So we don't want to move them, we want to leave them where they are. But we've got 2 plaza areas that are then connected by a smaller, narrower path. And we've also got to deal with the roller coaster that's churning out guests through its exit, all contributing to this narrower side of the path. So what we do in those instances is we find a way of splitting that traffic out and creating extra capacity if it's needed. But we don't just want a massive large plaza area, we want to give it a bit of variation. We want to think of the guest sightline and making it look a little bit good. So what I've done here is I've raised the land up to the roller coaster exit, and I've created this smaller plaza area that then leads down a ramp to the first top plaza area, or we'll have steps down to the bottom plaza area. Now this serves a couple of functions. The first is that it manages to deal with all of the traffic coming out of the roller coaster and into the roller coaster queue. It sort of keeps that away from the main area, but it also creates an extra direction and an extra pathway for guests to travel along. If this area becomes bottlenecked, they can just go up the stairs and down the ramp. So you're almost creating 2 pathways side by side when you're dealing with this kind of configuration. And so the next things that I need to do is to start the decoration and start the planning of the buildings. So what I've done here is I've started to plan out where I want things. So I know I want a game stall in the middle here, and I want a game stall in the middle here. So that's just layering out where I want them to be, and then I pull them together. And then I want a gift shop. It's going to be an open fronted gift shop. It's not going to be a full closed in building. And so that's going to sit quite nicely here. I've extended the diner out slightly so it's a bit bigger and it can service more people from this area. And I've also started to think about monetization of this top area. So the main thing that we can do is add ride photos for the actual roller coaster itself. So this is going to be the space for the ride photo booth. Whether it's going to end up being that size, I don't know, but that's the area. And I've also started to plan maintenance buildings as well. So I've made sure that I've got enough clearance underneath this bend for the tallest lorry to get through, and this would be the access point, and then this is going to be the maintenance area as well. So the area is coming together quite nicely in terms of guest flow. I'm quite happy with how this is going to be. I just now need to make sure that we're taking advantage of the most monetization options that we can do, squeeze as much money out of the area that we can, and also making sure that the area is now fit for purpose for the theme that we're doing. So remembering that this is a Boardwalk California style beachfront theme, I need to be aware of doing that and starting to make the decoration do that. So that's it for this update. Let's have a look at how it turns out in the next update. Alright, so the area is really starting to come together now. This whole idea of the boardwalk theme, the coastal walk theme is all starting to really come together now, especially as I'm starting to build. And I'm finding that I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from the Santa Cruz Boardwalk and also from Knott's Berry Farm with Hang Time. And I don't know if that was the intention of this area, especially with that whole boardwalk theme and the diner kind of theme that was here originally, but that's kind of where I'm drawing that inspiration from, and the kind of sight lines that you see and the decor that we're using and the fences and everything like that. So this is what I've done in the meantime. So there's been quite a lot that's changed, and this is quite a lot of work that's gone into it, but we're still by no means anywhere near finished. And so what I've done is I've sort of concentrated on the sight lines for this update, whereas the last update was concentrating on monetization and area functionality. Now we're starting to deal with the guest experience and what the guests actually see and feel within the area. So I've started to flesh out the game stalls. And again, these are functional. So when I'm building and I'm adding realism, I don't necessarily go for unfunctional realism. I like the game to still perform in a certain way and do what it needs to do, and then I use the unfunctional stuff to hide the ugly, unsightly bits. So this is what I'm doing here with this game store. So you've got a row of games units that are completely functional. Guests can go up and do them, and it's not particularly decorated in a way you would see game stalls at a fun fair or a theme park, but they do what they need to do in Planet Coaster. But next door, what I've done is completely the opposite, and I've started to use this idea of unnatural game stalls and unplayable game stalls, because this is hiding a gap in the path. So it kind of feels only right that that's how you would hide it. And so what's happening here is the games unit itself is coming together quite nicely and is now representing the kind of thing that you would see in a theme park where you have multiple games units that might be back to back. So that's the feel that I'm going for here. And again, it's that monetization thing. It's that stick some games in the middle of a path and someone will play it as they walk past. That kind of feeling. But the gift shop is now starting to come together quite nicely. So whereas before in the previous update this was just a basic blueprint where I wanted it, it's now starting to take shape, and it's this whole white wood, this kind of shingle roofing, the brickwork, the wood shop fronts and everything. This is all starting to come together with the boardwalk, and I'm borrowing the colours that were here originally. I want to stay true to the colouring of the area and the intentional theme, the original theme that was here. And so what's left to do on here is just to start padding out the pathway and start hiding the unsightly bits, and then start to flesh it out with some detail. So things like souvenir stands and poster stands and stuff, just to make it look like it's a bit of a gift shop as you're walking past. But it has this Victorian-y type feel to it, and it has a boardwalk feel to it now. It feels like you probably should be beside the sea at this point, so it's got that kind of area. And if you can imagine that there would be some kind of rock music playing, or it would be a beach kind of theme, beach kind of style. In the previous park, Colwell Wonderland, I had a beach area, but it was more Australian beach than it was American beach. So this is a very different build for me. I haven't done anything with the diner, and this is the next game stall that I've done. So I just wanted something that was a little bit unsightly. I wanted something that was a bit sort of hashed together, thrown up, literally stuck in the middle of the path. Please give us your money as you're walking past. And so that kind of achieves that here. The art shapes that I've used, they tend to be quite new, don't they? They tend to be very clean, and I wanted this to have a bit of an old effect to it, but that's quite difficult to do, so I've just kept it as it is. And again, I just need to find a way of hiding this gap in the path to make it look like it's all one continuous plaza path area. I've just started to put together the Insanity area again, and I wanted to use the stuff that was already here, because a lot of care and attention had been put into using these already, so this is already sort of in place. I just need to fix up the fencing, and just need to fix up the area and make this bit a bit more real. Likewise with the ride that we've got here. I'm not going to touch the queue line, I want to keep that as it is. I just need to find a way of making this bit come together. But the biggest change really has been up in this area. So the coaster now has a station, it now has a building ready for the ride photos, it now has part of a maintenance area, and it's all really coming together. So I've put the concrete pad down for the maintenance area, and I've also put the transfer track, and I've made this area fit as well. So this is really tight. In real life, you probably wouldn't have it as tight as this. This is like ridiculously tight, especially when it comes to the transfer track and this piece of track here. But you wouldn't operate the ride in any capacity whilst the transfer track is in use. And if you were putting on an additional train because it was busy, or taking one off because it was quiet, your train would wait here anyway, whilst this one was in process. So this kind of still works, but it's probably tighter than perhaps it would be allowed to. But we can still get vans and everything through here. So I've put the concrete pad down for where the road is going to be, so I can just finish this off, start detailing it, and then start the terrain work. The last thing that I did to the actual coaster itself is I just put a retaining wall underneath these brickworks. So we've got a lot of steam that's covering the area, so we're making the effort to give that ambience. But to add that slight element of realism, this would probably be built on some kind of brick or concrete cage. And so that's just what I've done there. I've just put the retaining wall in. It's hidden by the steam. You can't really see it that well, but you know it's there. It's just that sort of sub level of detail where you know it's there, but you don't necessarily notice it. And then finally, here's the station. I think it's pretty much finished from what I want it to be. And again, I borrowed a lot of inspiration from hang time with this, especially when it comes to the overhanging woodwork and everything. The slanted roof, the shingle roof. So that's sort of where we're sitting with the station. I wanted to use the floodlights along here to give it subtle lighting, and I wanted to keep this really clean, really bare, really open to the elements, especially as the idea is it's a cliff coaster, isn't it? It's like a dive coaster, so it's got that beach boardwalk theme. It's got that looking out, almost like a lifeguard hut theme. Is almost how I was going with this, without going down the surfer route, because that would just be borrowing too much from hang time. And so that's the update, really. I think the next one is going to see quite a bit of change. It's when we're going to start actually pulling the area together and finishing it off and putting the final touches in. So let's see how that turns out. Alright, so it's time for the big reveal. So before we do the final tour, let's have a look at the before and the after. So as you can see, there's been quite a lot that's changed, and the skyline is now very different as well. So I've taken a lot of the foliage and I've stripped it out, and I've thinned it out in places as well. So it's something that even I still do to this day, that I use foliage way too much. And so we sort of need to dapple it around a little bit just to create sort of variations on the skyline rather than complete walls. We should never really be looking to hide things behind vegetation unless you're going for a forest. So that's what I've done here, and as a result, it's now opened up the viewpoint of the coaster completely, and also these drop towers that you couldn't really see before. And so it now gives you a purpose to walk in that direction, and walking in that direction is going to walk through the area that we've now developed. So let's go on a tour. Oh, sad janitor. So here we are with the first part of the area. So I've put all of the security fences up on all of the rides, and I've also done some signage around the rides as well. And I've used UK legislation to go for this, and it dictates that different rides have got different severities, and the severity of that ride dictates what the signage is, the wording of that signage, and how far apart they should be. So for example, UK roller coasters would have danger of death, keep out signs, and they would be placed every sort of 8 meters or so, right around the perimeter of the ride. But then spinning rides like this one over here would just have danger ride area instead. You wouldn't necessarily need a danger of death sign. You can, and there's nothing stopping you, but the minimum requirement here would be ride area, keep out. So that's what I've done, and I've just grabbed them from the workshop. And I'm sorry, I don't know who did who. If I can, I'll put some links in the description, because you're going to see quite a lot of TMTK items that I've added along here now. So thank you so much if you see your item here. You've done a really great job of some of the stuff that's on here, so thank you. So looking at this area then, I've opened it out completely, so the pathing area has been completely widened, and the way that we've had to do this in terms of the pathing area is it's to do with the law of the park. So we're now saying that this ride would have been added and this area would have been concreted over to make it happen, and as a result it's opened it up quite nicely. It's now quite a wide path, and then as we carry on walking through, we come to the other flat ride. And so I've retained all of the buildings that were in the original queue line for this, but again I've just taken all of the foliage and I've made it much thinner. I thinned it right out, and I've just used the same colour palettes and the same vegetation that was there before, just much more sparingly, so you see this dappled effect. And as a result, you can now see through to Tornado, and you can now see things that are behind it as well. So it just creates that sightline and a purpose to walk in a direction. I've reconfigured where the buildings are though, because I wanted to bring the queue down the side of the path, and that's kind of something that you would plan when you're doing a real park. You say, well, okay, I've got a piece of concrete that I'm putting in as a path, so I may as well double it up as a bit of a queue line as well. Use what you can rather than creating anything extra that's needed. So that's what I've done here. I've just brought the queue right along the pathway, entered into a cattle pen, and then it goes into a second cattle pen. The autosave is finished. It goes into a second cattle pen, and then it goes on to the actual ride itself. And so I've also covered the path as well, just using the firehouse flat roof as well, just to give it a little bit of consistency with the texture on the path, and it also creates it slightly differently. It's like a slight difference between the two pathing areas. And then we come up to our roller coaster area. So now we've got an amazing view of the first drop of the coaster. We've thinned out the vegetation so we can now see most of the coaster, rather than just hearing the screams from behind trees. We now have this height variation with the plaza area. So if I want to carry on walking, I can just walk down this way, or I can walk up to where the ride photo booth is now, and I can either go up the ramp here for our disabled guests and our accessible guests, or if I'm wanting to, I can go upstairs. But it leaves us with this very nice height variation. It creates a bit of sort of sightline difference. It's just something nice, something different to look at. And then when we come up to the actual ride area, the ride photo area, you can see now it's been kitted out. So I've just taken a picture of the ride on our circuit, random ride. Haven't done too much with the actual ride photo area, the same as I did with the Arbor Valley guest episode that I did. I don't really want to kit it out too much. I just want it to be representative of it being a ride photo area. It's believable as an area. You go, okay, I'm going to come up and ride and look at your photo. So then we come across to the main area. So this is now the station. I've added the fans in, and again I've added a whole load of signage that's going around. We also have a ride sign and a height sign, and again just this top plaza area just creates that nice bit of variation, a bit of height to the area. And then we come down and we sort of hit straight away our first games unit, and there's the principal in action walking past. I'm just going to spend some money, and then we walk along this way, and again we've still got this open sightline, so we can now see the RMC in the background, we can now see the drop towers in the background. I can look back and I can see the actual coaster itself, and it's now made a feature of the zero-G roll as well. So it's now a lot of sightlines have been opened up because of the thinning out of that vegetation. I've added in all of the fairy lights as well. These were in the original queue line, and I loved the idea. I love the principle of how it is. And at night and at sunset, this now looks so good. It looks like a boardwalk. It feels like it's a boardwalk, and it now achieves what you want it to achieve. So we've got our wooden shack shops along the side here. They've turned out really nicely from ground level as well. Really simple design, art shapes and wood beams and stuff, but it just comes across quite nicely. I've done the roofing colour in the same colour as the branding colours, but the design is consistent across. I've just put some clutter and everything outside of the gift shops, so I've just again, these are Hydro, I think, that did these. Amazing postcard stands, but it's just the perfect clutter for sitting outside of a gift shop. And then you've got your game stall here. That's just our representative game stall, and I've just added the domes where you'd put the money in. They wouldn't have a cash register. They have those money domes that they don't have access to the actual cash. And then we come through, and then we've got our row of, again, functional games units, which is quite good. It's quite nice. And then we come out this way, and then we enter into going back to the main strip area. And again, I've just cleaned up all of this. I've added in this low grade, low height fencing as opposed to top tall fencing. And then we come back through to the main strip. The queue area, I've purposely kept on show here, but I've varied the terrain, so it's now a bit hilly. It creates a bit of depth, but I purposely wanted to keep this open. I didn't want to hide this away. You're using quite a lot of shade with these queue covers anyway, and the main reason I didn't want to hide this away is because of the view of the lift hill. You still need to be able to see the coaster from that side, because remember, you might be coming from whatever's being built here. So you still need some kind of sight line through these trees. And then we come around this way and we're on the main strip. And again, exactly the same principle. I've really thinned out the vegetation. I've kept this low fence. Now there's only one thing that I can think of here that's going to cause an issue. Now we can't really get around it because of the way that the ride is designed and the way that the maintenance area and everything is put together. And that's the maintenance shed itself. Is very visible from the main strip. So my advice would be for the future of this park, where we put some vegetation and this in, this actually would probably be shop fronts. You would want to do some kind of building or something to hide the fact that you've got a maintenance area behind, and then that maintenance area would then probably share functionality with those shop fronts. And so we have just got all of our signage up. Our no entry staff only, safety equipment must be worn, the gate is locked. We've got our bollards and we've got all sorts of stuff that's going on back here. And I'll show you what I've done with the maintenance area when we look at the overall area. So let's do that. Let's have a look at the actual area itself. So the actual maintenance area itself has had a massive change. I've added all of these bits in as well. So all of our electricity signage and our health and safety signage. We've also got our electricity units and clutter now that's all around this area, so it's now much more believable as a maintenance area. I've changed out the bookshelves for different shelves. This would be where you'd put your stuff, right? This would like throw your stuff on before you go to the ride. Haven't cluttered this up at all. I just wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it clean. And then, looking at this area from the top down, this is how it now looks. So as you can see, we've completely widened out the pathway. So the original pathway would have come down here, and all of this would have been grass and hidden away. It's now completely wide open, and like I say, it looks so good at night. So let's do that. Let's have a look at night. So I've used the Mike Sheets lighting trick on this one. So I've put all of the fairy lights down. Again, it's that boardwalk thing. It's that boardwalk effect that we're going for. And these lights would throw light onto the ground, but they don't in the game. So all I've done is I've sunk the area lights underneath the ground, just where and along the actual fairy lights themselves, and it now creates like this lovely dappled light effect. What I've also done is I've done some coloured lights around areas where there would be coloured lights. So this is like a slight tinge of pink and blue, and then you've also got pink and red over here, and you've also got green up here as well, and it just gives the area that atmosphere, that sort of late evening, really warm, lovely, glowing kind of like boardwalk by the sea feeling. And so these strip lights that were in originally, they do such a great job of giving that effect. So yeah, I like how this has turned out. It's opened up very nicely. It's now got a very real feeling to it, and it's this idea of realism and adding in just those final details, those final touches that just change everything completely. So I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. With Jess's permission, I'll put this file up for download. So if that permission's been given, then you'll see a link in the description. If not, then I'm sure if we reach out to Jesse, we might be able to get it done. But either way, that's the episode. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for getting to the end of the episode. You know what to do if you want to see future episodes of Reel Up My Ride. Subscribe, leave a comment, send a like, whatever it is you want to do. But until we see you next time, absolutely take care of yourselves. I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.